over the past 2-3 years, we have seen rural distress actually increasing, especially for the farm sector. Cash flow for the farm sector had been fairly robust earlier than that. Some of the, I think a lot of people attribute to the, the fragility in the farm sector to failure of monsoon, etc. But we believe that there are very critical structural issues that are there. I'll introduce the speakers. So first one adjacent to me is Mr. Devendra Sharma. He's a noted journalist and columnist. He has been writing a lot on issues relating to food, agriculture, trade policies relating to that. Jatin Singh is the founder and CEO of SkyMet. He has, in his organization, has been producing a lot of these monsoon forecasts, etc. So he has some insights to share as well in terms of how the monsoon is progressing. So that is one aspect that he can talk about. And quite apart from that, he has considerable knowledge on crop insurance, tenancy reforms, etc. So I've had some discussion with him prior to this forum. Mr. Manoj Rawat is basically heading the agribusiness at RBL. He was earlier with NABARD, and he has done a considerable amount of work relating to agriculture sector. So he brings in a lot of insight in terms of this whole topic of how the agri income can be doubled. His view is that there has to be a more comprehensive approach, and I think if you do bits and pieces, it will all add up to doubling of the farm income. Uttam Gupta is an expert on agri inputs, particularly fertilizer, agriculture, and food grains. He has been writing columns and writing his opinion, also relating to crop protection, IPR, and WTO. He has a very interesting insight relating to GST as well, and the implication for the fertilizer sector. And I think he has got a very deep understanding also with respect to the DBT, which the government is trying to implement with respect to the fertilizer sector. Mr. Sharma, can we start with you? So what's your take on the subject, whether it is feasible, how challenging would it be?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important that we are discussing a topic which normally is a down-market subject for the media as well as for the policymakers. Thank you for that. Doubling the farm income, to me it is an amusing thought or amusing statement also, because first of all, we don't even know as to what exactly is the income that farmers have now. If you look at the economic survey of this year, 2016, the economic survey tells us that the farm income per household in 17 states of India, and what they have done is they have also worked out how much he has been able to sell in the market and how much he is keeping at home. That also they have, added to that, and they have worked out that the farm income in 17 states is 20,000 rupees per year, which means about 1,600 rupees is the monthly income of a farming family in 17 states of India. Now, I thought the government should have known that this is the kind of a precarious situation existing in this country. But then we go on, saying that we will double the income. Even if you double this income to 40,000 rupees by next 5 years, what have you done? What have you achieved? If you're just for inflation, in any case, it will be around that figure. And the second part is that on an average for the country, if you look at it, I would go by, of course, there are various statistics that are floating around, but the Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices, which I think has a huge network and does it statistically in a manner that is accepted, that also, because they also fix the minimum support price based on that. And I have looked into those reports, and I realized that the average income per hectare in this country is about 3,000 rupees from agriculture. Now, if this is the level of income today, I think to say that we will double the income in the next 5 years, I think you are not very serious. You just make a statement because you think you have to address that particular segment of society or the nation. But I thought this requires immediate action. It's an urgency that the country needs to focus on, so that at least you can raise the income or provide a kind of a income to them. 3,000 rupees, can we imagine how farmers are living? And then we say farmers are committing suicide because they are not raising their productivity, and because they have a whole lot of, as you rightly said, structural problems. Yes, they are there. And then some people say because they drink a lot and they are wasting money on the marriages of their sons and daughters. These are also kind of arguments which I see being flashed around. And nobody wants to go and go and see, farmer also has aspirations. He also wants to get his son married or daughter married. But if he doesn't have income, what do you expect him to do? Now, that's the question which I think is paramount today. And the essential part of Indian agriculture, which actually is the bane of Indian agriculture, I would say, is the denial of income to the farmers. It is actually, we are denying, because, just to ensure that we get food cheaper, so that the inflation doesn't rise, we are actually penalizing the farmer. Farmer has done his job. They have done a remarkable job in this country, but we are actually penalizing the farmer for by not giving him his due income. I just would like to give one statistic, and then I will stop. Is that I did analysis which said that to just work out, comparative analysis. In 1970, the minimum support price for wheat was 76 rupees per quintal. In paddy was 51 rupees per quintal. In the next 45 years, in 2015, the wheat price goes up by 19 times, whereas when I looked at the salaries of government employees, they go up by 120 to 150 times. The salaries of teachers, professors go up by 150 to 170 times. The salary of school teachers go up by 300 to 280 to 320 times. The salary of corporate employees go up by 300 to 1,000 times. And then the farmer's income goes up by 19 times. So obviously, you are deliberately keeping him impoverished, and then you see that, the miracle is not being done. So don't blame the farmer. That's what we have been saying. We need to really come to the rescue of farmers today, and I think that is where we need support from all sections of society to understand, and then to try to build up those kind of strategies or action plans.
Yeah, so thank you. So what's your thought, Mr. Singh, on this issue?
I think the kind of rural distress we have seen the past couple of years, especially from 2000s, we have no choice. I mean, it's more of a political thing. If doubling or tripling, is it going to be done? Probably not. Okay, because it is just so hard. But that shouldn't stop the government or the people or companies to orient ourselves in that direction, because effectively there are 600 million people, as Mr. Sharma said, are in year after year, season after season. How do you expect someone to live off 1,600 rupees a month? Mm-hmm. And it also, and the challenge of climate change creates, for example, one of the big victories of Green Revolution was that it gave you 2 seasons. So if one failed, the other would work. But climate change has taken our, winter crop that's happened 14-15. You have hail and unseasonal rainfall coming in and taking that bedrock of productivity. So it's a very challenging thing. I would expect, if you had a challenging telecom, computing, construction, they are nowhere near solving this problem, because it is as much as an economic problem as it is a political problem. Land consolidation. You want to increase farmer incomes? One of the arguments I've heard is that we increase the size of the land. That's a war in itself. Right. So, but we really have to find our way around it. Otherwise, we're creating a internal civil political problem for a long, long time.
Mr. Rawat, so what's your thoughts?
First of all, we all know what the challenge is.
Right.
As rightly said, if we quote the economic survey, it's at 20,000. I don't know from where the figure is. I still doubt it.
Right.
But if it is true, 1670 rupees per farmer household, I think doubling this is not a big challenge. 1700 ko 3400 banana, that's not a big challenge.
Right.
But does that bring the farmer out of distress? Ask us today, if I bring it to 3400, and that too, that was an announcement in the budget, right. And that too now it is a 5-year plan. Right. If you see, it is aligned to 2022, which is not the 12th, but the 13th 5-year plan.
Right.
In 12th 5-year plan, our growth in agriculture has plummeted to 1%.
Right.
Even if we want to achieve a significant thing, it has to grow in next year by 8%, which we don't think. If we have to do it, I think 15% is too aspirational, but 8 to 9% if it happens, I think we will be able to increase. But it's not a matter of only the growth happening. It's the quality of growth which you are talking about. If we see since 1972 when the priority sector credit policy was formed and today, can you believe this year's agriculture credit target is 9 lakh crore? That much money is going to flow to the sector. It is $135 billion. But where it is going? 75% of it is going just for maintaining the continuity of agriculture and not in the capital formation.
Right.
Not to create any sustainable productive assets. So if we just see, we have to double the income of farmer. Our earlier policies were production led. We have to increase the production. We went to 260 million ton, to 80 million ton. Nowhere the farm income was in picture, whether the farmer is getting his due or not, whether he is getting the share in the consumer's wallet or not. That was never the focus. It rightly has come at the right point when the real distress is there. Now we have to shift slightly from the just production orientation to keep the farmer in farming, because it is very critical for us. Otherwise, how will survive?
Right. Dr. Gupta, just wanted to take your initial views, and especially with a focus on the productivity, because you have a lot of expertise in the fertilizer and agri inputs. So what's your thought on the subject?
Okay, fertilizer I will take up subsequently, but initially I became a little despondent hearing Shyama, but having heard my colleague Manoj on the left, I feel quite buoyant and I have been able to resurrect my level of confidence, which was temporarily going down a bit. I agree with most of the points that he has made. Essentially, the issues which Prime Minister has been talking about, which people generally tend to dismiss as being, just building castles in the air, reducing the vulnerabilities of the farmers insofar as productivity enhancement is concerned. This is something which you have captured very nicely, and I'm impressed with your point. There's an RBI committee which came up with a very startling revelation that the money, 900,000 crores of rupees, bulk of that, those land-owning farmers, they take that money and then in turn lend it to the landless farmers or the cultivators. You can imagine the dastardly consequences and the income levels. Irrigation, APMC you talked about, very nice point. All state governments should join hands with Prime Minister Modi to ensure that this APMC Act is demolished. Not just that, you must be in a position to create parallel infrastructure for private marketing. There is no point in demolishing the existing mandis. 2 mandis have been, including Delhi, Azadpur, you see, but you have not. So that decision has become more or less redundant. So, one, reducing the vulnerabilities of the farmers so that he raises his productivity, and insurance also comes in over here, because insurance, you may do any amount of things and then there is a disaster. The gentleman talked about that. There is a drought and everything is washed off. You see what happens to your income. So, and finally, the e-marketing concept, it's a wonderful concept. There are hundreds of things. All that I would like to say is that what Honorable Prime Minister has been talking, we got to get deeper into all those areas and see how all of us can contribute, especially the state governments, in contributing. We don't need intervention. We need unshackling of the entire supply chain from the controls of the government. And that is something which is going to give a big boost on all these fronts.
So, according to Mr. Sharma, I think, correct me if I'm right in terms of depicting what you say, it's only a limited 6% of the farmers who actually benefit from that. So, MSP has been an instrument of intervention. If you look at last 30 years, from 2006 onwards, that there is a maximum increase in the MSPs of various crops, including cereals, including food grains and other crops. So, how effective can that be an instrument for intervention to increase the realization?
If you look at the minimum support price, it's a very, very interesting debate, I must say, and I think it's time to understand what MSP is all about. I remember the Shantakumar committee, which was set up, as you know, some years back to look into the bifurcation of FCI. When I made a presentation there, my assessment to him was that we are procuring about roughly 30% farmers in India are the ones who are part of the procurement system. So Shantakumar was very keen and he said, are you sure 30%? I said, that's what I presume. And there were economists sitting there. But then he ordered the FCI to tell us exactly what percentage of farmers are getting the benefit of MSP. And we were told it is later that only 6% farmers of India are dependent on MSP. And everything we talk about is, oh, this is monopolization. This is monopolization of the entire market and so on and so forth. 94% farmers are in any case dependent on the markets. Yeah. If markets were so efficient, these farmers should have been doing remarkably well. I'm sure you will agree. It is MSP which is actually making the farmers survive in some part of the country, and that's what I want to explain here. In Punjab, you have the MSP. We know Punjab is a place where the entire infrastructure is there for MSP. There are flaws in the APMC markets, I don't deny that. But since 2007, Bihar does not have APMC. They don't have APMC Act. Now, interestingly, in Punjab and Haryana, the farmers at least get whatever is the minimum support price. In Bihar, the best that they do, and the farmers are not inefficient in Bihar also, the best that they do, they get a price of 800, 900 or 1,000 rupees per quintal.
Yes.
Now, that is what the markets do.
Yes.
And then we say the farmers will get a better price. Please don't call exploitative price as a better price. That's one thing which I would like to say. What India needs is more of mandis, not less of mandis. There are only 7,000 mandis in this country, APMC regulated markets. What we need actually, if we were to have mandis in a 5 kilometer radius, we would need about 42,000 mandis, and that's where I would expect the investors to come and invest. That's what the country needs, and we are trying to actually get away from that system. In Punjab is under tremendous pressure to dismantle the APMC markets, and then that what I've been saying is, if you push these farmers out of the MSP regime, the Punjab farmer will also become Bihar farmer. Is that what you want? I think what we want is more of a regime where the farmer's income goes up, and that is through MSP. What is wrong there? Now, you have to really balance it out that you haven't ensured procurement for pulses, for instance. There are two crops in which we have done remarkably well since independence, or since the Green Revolution came in, sorry for saying independence, is wheat and rice. Or in that matter, cotton and sugarcane, because they have assured price, farmers get an assured return. In the case of other crops, we announce the price, but we don't buy it. There's no assured market. That's the reason. Pulses, you don't have to do anything. I've been telling this government for long that all you need to do is make it a point that, you'll buy everything that the farmers produce, and you'll see our pulses production jumping like anything. But we don't want to do that. Because there's a huge interest which says, no, don't do that, because, I don't have to tell you, those who want the dismantling of the APMC, it is quite obvious what we are trying to aim at. Now, I would like that the entire country has 42,000 mandis where farmers, you can then decide which crop you need to give a MSP, which price we need to, discourage, and so on and so forth. Yes, but the time for the MSP, perhaps globally, if you also look at WTO, is now over. People are saying price policy time is over. Now it has to be replaced by income policy. So let's get on to the income. How farmers can get better income should be the priority.
Sir,
if I may
Gupta,
button.
if you want to.
Yeah, very important point. The objective should be to galvanize the corporate sector into the procurement activities from the farmers. Arun Jaitley has made a very important announcement, FDI 100% in food processing. Now, paradoxically, it so happens the moment you make an announcement, then you get into a psychological sort of warfare. Oh, multinationals would come in and things like that. So after the finance minister makes the announcement, we have to get into the practicalities of this. After the finance minister makes the announcement, you have the food processing minister coming up with half a dozen conditions. Now the guidelines have not been notified as yet. The issue has got stuck in the interministerial committee, Commerce Ministry wanting this to happen without any conditions, and Food Processing Minister wanting the multinational companies to buy from the farmers, to buy only the produce which is manufactured within the country. Now, if you have all kinds of conditions imposed, then even before the fellow starts running, he gets is stuck. So therefore, any policy that we make, let's not allow ourselves to be hamstrung by certain ideological predilections that something would happen, It does, I mean, those are merely based on fears, you see. So, a good remuneration for the farmer, you have to give him, as he has very rightly said, Manoj, you have to give him opportunities to sell. Let there be dozens of fellows lined up before the farmer to buy his produce, so that his vulnerability to a particular market, APMC or whatever jargon you may use, is reduced.
Right.
Make him, and this is empowerment in the true sense of the term. Empowerment comes by unshackling. Empowerment doesn't come by interventions and obtrusive controls.
Yeah, so the next question is for, Jatin Singh. I would want you to address two issues. One that, first, which is very immediate in terms of what is your outlook in terms of the monsoon that is progressing. You have shared some insights on that. So that's number one. Number two, I want you to address issues relating to crop insurance.
The monsoon is okay, but the monsoon is not great. The initial forecast was that the monsoon would be great. I don't think it is going to be above normal. The last week has been, August is a very important month. Till the 10th of August, everything was fine. You're 103 and you're doing very well. You're getting 10 to 12 millimeters of rainfall a day. That for about 5-6 days dropped to about 5.4. Even if you finish August if all the days from now on are normal, you would still finish in August. That is normal. Okay. And September also could be normal, in which case your monsoon should hover around 100% as opposed to between 106 or 109% that was initially forecast by us in the IMD. So, so it's not like last year that it would just stop. That is not going to happen. But it doesn't, because the La Nina, we are an ENSO neutral, the La Nina is not as strong as expected. There was also, it seems to be, there's what is called the Indian dipole, Indian Ocean dipole, which is suppressing the rainfall. So that is one thing. You have a low pressure system right now. There's another precipitation cycle that comes after 23rd. But it's not a blockbuster kind of monsoon to me right now. I mean, I can see 15-20 days in advance on a general scale. So that's the first thing. On crop insurance, you see, crop insurance has been there for the better part of the last decade. Okay. Why this policy is revolutionary is because the total subsidy burden has been taken by the governments. Okay. It is, in theory, a perfect policy, and I will take criticism for that after this, but I'll tell you in theory why. One of the biggest problems, you see, you know this better than I do, your markets people, farmer distress, 2 droughts back to back, 1 bad winter crop also costs a huge amount of money. That doesn't leave much for the government to do. I mean, because you're giving 500 crores there, 600 crores there for this district, Marathwada, running trains, digging wells, all of that. Now, crop insurance as a tool, basically, fiscally, if the government is paying, if the central government has paid 11,000 crores and the state government are doing 22,000 crores, that means all crop risk costing more than 22,000 crores is taken care of by the reinsurers worldwide. So you have leveled off your red to 22,000 crores. That's the first part, fiscally. Why? Giving 100% subsidy is actually not that expensive, in theory. Okay, I'll keep on saying that. Because crop insurance is there to to basically take care, up till a certain extent, the loss of production. But if you have a drinking water problem, and it is not disaster relief, it is not catastrophic relief. First point. Now, where is that level in low production and catastrophe of a drought or a flood is not clear. It depends district to district, state by state. Okay. So something, for example, MP has had successive floods, and there are at least 2 more floods that I can see that is going to come. Okay. If parts of Betul or Hoshangabad are going to get damaged, how much of that damage is going to be covered by crop insurance, and how much of that damage is going to be covered by disaster relief that the government will pay? Yeah. You know. So that is the first point. But it also kind of limits your catastrophic relief, because the financial instrument clearly says if it doesn't rain for so many days, you will get the money. Okay. Right. And the risk is, and it's a gamble that is passed on to reinsurance worldwide. So reinsurance worldwide is playing on two major catastrophic risks. Just to explain this to you. One is Gulf of Mexico hurricane, the other is Japan earthquake. These are risks that attract a huge amount of premium. You put Indian drought into that pool, you can play one against the other, and they are not the other two. One is a meteorological event, one is a seismological event, the other is also a meteorological event, and they do not set themselves off at the same time.
Right.
So if you pass on that risk globally, you can get a drought to more or less pay for itself. If there is a drought in India, you don't have a drought in East China, Japan, and California. You have a flood risk, so you can transfer one off the other theoretically, and that's how global catastrophic businesses are done. I think it's a very interesting policy, and we've been doing this for the past decade or so.
Dr. Gupta, so just wanted to take your initial views, and especially with a focus on
GST. GST has a lot of potential. All the benefits which will accrue to the other industries, they can accrue to the fertilizer also. But unfortunately, there are two major bottlenecks. One, gas, which is the fundamental feedstock for manufacture of urea. About 80% of the capacity is based on use of gas. Gas, for whatever reasons, has been kept outside the purview of the GST. Now, the moment you keep it outside, all the potential benefits which are associated with GST will automatically disappear.
right.
So what it means is that a gas company, if he is paying certain taxes on the inputs and the stores and consume it, they will not be able to take credit for this. Your gas cost will go up. State governments which are imposing value-added tax on the gas 15 to 20%, they will continue to levy.
Right.
They will continue to levy entry taxes, octroi. So all the pitfalls of the existing dispensation will continue.
Right.
So therefore, in one of my Financial Express pieces, I have said GST will boomerang on fertilizers unless and until you take these two important, you remove these two important bottlenecks.
So thank you very much. So, this session will end here. I'll very quickly do the closing remarks. People who want to have further discussion can stay back. We have arrangements to do small discussions that we can do. But clearly, on the objective of doubling of farm income, I think with the issues that have been raised, it doesn't look to be a very simple process. I think we still will be grappling around this objective 5 years down the line. Thank you everybody for contributing to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you.